just a little recap of what we did. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So I would recommend that you do your specific releasing stuff, making sure that you're going around the hip crease, so into the hip flexor, around into the TFL and into the glutes, because that'll help the rotation in the hip. But specifically we want to kind of look right now at addressing kind of the imbalance up in the trunk and upper body. So releasing on your QL on the medicine ball, so from your bum, and then rolling down gently and into the lower rib. You said that you were going up a little bit higher, but I wouldn't. I would just go to there and walk down, so focus on just that muscle. If you want to get into the lats as well, then I would do that with your roller and maybe sliding on the roller on your back and rolling up and down that way. But so a bit on that right side, so that relaxes that tissue on that side. And then as we added in today, the lacrosse ball in the side of the rib. Okay, so in that little groove between your ribs and your pelvis. So you're going to lie down and place the ball there. We had the head propped up so that you can kind of just dig into the ball and just rolling a little bit back and forward until you find that nice little nook for you to rest into, and just letting your body kind of surrender to the ball, breathing into it and letting go. Okay, just having a little wiggle and oscillation if you need to. And it might be, if you feel okay, to do the Franklin ball underneath your abdomen while you're here, and just anything that's going to hold the rib cage down, anything that's going to pull you out of alignment, we want to kind of release before we do your arm stuff, your core work, even your glute work, okay, so that we're in a better position. Okay, so just a little bit of rolling. So as we normally do, kind of that 2 minutes worth. Then I would release underneath your ribs, obviously being careful of not going too high up with the ribs that we're going to kind of hurt it, but just releasing underneath. As you said, that left side was a little bit tender. So I know you said that going kind of into this position kind of hurt your back. So maybe go down into this position and have a little wiggle. Anything that you can do to kind of just wiggle out that tension and make sure that you are on the one side underneath the ribs. So a little bit of wiggling, maybe even coming down and feeling, because if that is compressed, then those rectus abdominis muscles might be pulling down as well. Okay, so we want to kind of release that so that we can also come into extension. Okay, you can play around and feel this side, but make sure you're kind of spending a bit more time on your sticky side. And then while you've got the Franklin ball, you could do a little bit of your pelvis work here, but I would recommend maybe coming up and doing some of the standing work into the breath, so the breath into the ball, and then maybe come down and do your pelvis before you do kind of bridge work or any stability work. So ball at the wall. So after you've done that releasing, get your ball kind of just into the back of the ribs and back of pelvis on that left side, and just focus your breath there. So breathing in, expanding, and kind of elongating. Yeah, so you're standing up against the wall and just directing that breath into it. And sometimes that can be really helpful. The other thing that you can do, which I should have mentioned on the floor, is just resting on that left side. Just breathing, letting yourself lie. If you're listening to a podcast or something, especially if you go to bed, just letting that left side drop, okay? So letting all that fascia kind of unwind and soften in towards the mat, okay? So breath into the wall. So if you do a little bit of that, okay, breathing in, maybe doing 5 to 10 breaths. So what we're trying to do is just expand the ribs a little bit, because when we're compressed, those ribs are going to be kind of locked in, and then that's going to lock the scapula down. Okay, so we want the scapula to be able to be free, to kind of move up the back. A little bit of serratus waking up, so your lats with your roller or the Franklin ball underneath the serratus will be really helpful. And then we did do a bit of the balls, kind of breathing into the balls. And even that will be really, really effective to just kind of wake up the scapula. So if we get another ball here. Okay. And then I'm just breathing here, getting the balls in the right place on the side of the ribs. And what you'll probably notice is the right side will breathe a little bit more. So we want to encourage that breath into the left side. Maybe even letting the rib cage shift a little bit over to the left. Good. Okay, so a few of those there. And maybe a little bit of elevation of that left shoulder blade. Okay, so inhale and exhale. And this will warm us up before we do the band work. Good, one more. So I'm elevating that left shoulder blade, just creating that space there. I'm not really trying to drop down into the right, and it's not really a pursuit of stretch. Try and go for the pursuit of space. So just creating more space between your ribs and your pelvis, okay? And then we're gonna do our band. Okay, so all of this is prep work before you kind of do your strength work. So band under the foot, okay? Making sure that the tension isn't too strong. So my measure of this is that I can get the arm kind of comfortably up, and probably about here I can feel a bit of tension, but it's not crazy. So it shouldn't feel super loaded there. So first, get your standing posture. What we talked about with you today is I think there's becoming a little bit too much of a tuck and a squeeze of our abdominals. So we want to release the pelvis a little bit. You can see already how my spine goes up a little bit more. Okay, so I want you to be in maybe a slight anterior tilt, but it shouldn't go into hyperextension in your low back. So an anterior tilt, and our weight in our heels, okay, so that we feel the hamstrings. And then we want to retract the abdomen. We're going to be very careful we're not kind of going with an inhale, that it should very much be a retraction that lifts us up. And then a feeling for you of going up with your sternum to create that length in the upper back, okay? So when you're doing this band work, you want to make sure you're in that good standing posture before we do it, okay? So a little bit of a gentle anterior retraction, elongation, and then we're going to send that left arm up. I'm going to glide, and it might be even helpful to have the other hand kind of here. I'm going to glide the rib cage, the shoulder blade up. I'm kind of thinking almost more of my side ribs lifting as I'm pressing down into the left foot. So the left heel is pressing down, and my right rib cage, my left ribs are lifting up. And you can see my side bend is the result of the lift. I'm not trying to side bend, okay? And then return it back down. So maybe an inhale to lift, weight in the heels, check your retraction, and then gliding the ribs away from the pelvis. Again, I'm not trying to pursue a stretch. I'm just trying to pursue space. I'm trying to increase the length between my ribs and my pelvis. And back. We talked about the band also coming from this direction. So if it was tied somewhere, right, out to the side on your banister, then your band can come from the banister and then come over. And then you could do a little bit of lean into your right leg. Just a little bit of loading up the right leg. And that feels quite nice even without the band, but if I had that little bit of tension to create, and I don't want to compress over onto this right side, I want to just kind of load up this leg and open up the chain on that left side, okay? Your band, okay, I'm going to do the band from here, which hopefully you can see, okay? So I've got my left side here. So what I want to do is start protracted in the shoulder blade, okay, and turned to the right. So I'm a little bit rotated to the right. Standing posture for now, we're going to do double legs while the foot is the state it's in. Okay, and then I'm going to pull a little bit here. So with the torso turned to the right, I'm going to start to pull on that arm. Now what I'm trying to prevent is the hyper retraction of the shoulder blade, okay? So I want to get the arm kind of just a little bit midway, a little bit of elevation, and then I'm going to pull the arm and the trunk back at the same time. Now what that does is get my lats really working and not my retractors, my pincher backers, okay? So then the arm is on the side in that 90-degree angle, and I want to feel those lats at the back, feel my corset, and check that we're not kind of tucking under. So we're in that anterior tilt again, and then return and let the trunk go back into that right rotation. Okay, so pull a little bit first, and then the trunk and the arm. You can still think about that external rotation, but it's very, very subtle. What we've got to be careful of is external rotation doesn't wing back the shoulder blade. So it's very, very subtle. I want you to try and feel those lats at the back of you, okay? So that scapula sits very flat on the back of your ribs. Okay, and I can really feel that, making sure we're not doing too much biceps, so nice 90-degree angle. I've got a little bend in my knees, just so I have that slight anterior, and then come back. Okay, so one more time. So returning to the right, we're pulling a little bit and allowing the shoulder blade to elevate a bit. And then as I pull my trunk back to center, my arm is then arriving on the side, and then I can feel the lats. And if you don't feel the lats, you might need to just do a little bit of checking in where your position is so that you can feel it, and then the other arm going forward. So it just creates that little bit of rotation to that side. Now, what you've got to be careful of is when you're pulling on that left side, that we don't then go into that concavity, okay? So really feel how right and left feels. You'll probably find that your right pulling will be more dominant and connected, and then the left side will be a little bit weaker. So we might want to do more on the left than on the right. And the pushing, you might find that you need to push more on the right. Okay, so it creates that rotation that way, and less on the left. But I always think a little bit of both is good. So if we push, and I'm going to take some of the tension off because my pushing is not as strong as my pulling. Okay, so the big thing here is making sure that when the arm is in this position and when it comes back, that we're not letting it wing. Okay, so I have to really focus on this. So my anterior tilt, weight in the heels, and then I'm pushing the arm straight. Okay, getting the arm nice and straight, and then I want you to protract your scapula around your ribs. Okay, making sure that we're not being pulled into that concavity on the left, so I'm keeping my ribs very stable. And then I want to do kind of what I did on the row. So I'm going to slowly pull the arm, but I'm going to turn to the left, and then slowly bring the trunk and the arm back. So that'll stop the scapula from kind of just winging back. Okay, so I push till the arm is straight, protract. Keep the protraction, bend the arm, let it elevate, and then bring it back, the trunk and the arm together. And that should stop the scapula from kind of winging back, okay? Do that on the other side, or then you won't be able to see me as well, okay? So I'm going to push the arm. Maybe consider the ribs coming back as you push, protracting. So make sure it's not coming from your humerus pushing, that it's coming from your scapula going around your ribs so you feel your obliques. Okay, and then now I'm pushing with my left. I'm going to stay to the left. Let the arm come slowly back, and then come back to center. So I'm trying to not to let the scapula wing back and fling back. Okay, push, straight arm. Protract. That creates that little turn in your trunk to the right. Keep to the right as the arm starts to bend. Let the shoulder elevate a little bit, and then come back to center. Okay, you know how many to do till you feel it, but feel what it feels like to push on the right and pull on the left. okay, whether that stabilizes the trunk better. That's what I found with my my other client, is that she really had to pull on one side and push on the other, and then she just did a few on the other side. So you need to see what feels good for your body. I was just thinking about this exercise for extension that also helped us with our shoulders as well. So if we kneel, and you can play with this and see what you feel. So we kneel on the band, and we have the arms a little bit out in front, almost like a bicep curl. Now that's going to scoop the shoulder blades around the ribs, okay, so we're in a better position. Make sure we're not clenching, okay? And then I'm going to go up into extension. So I'm going to let the arms come up a little bit, and then I'm going to lift the sternum up, and then we can play a little bit. If you feel like the ribs are shifting to the right, then we can shift them a little bit to the left. I can also, once I'm starting to extend, I can do a little bit more on that left side if need be, okay? So the idea is, instead of doing it on the floor where it kind of gets a bit yucky, we can have that support through the trunk here. Bring the arms in. We don't want too much tension. This band is actually a little bit too strong for me here, so I want a really light band. I'm going to bring the band up, lift the sternum up to the chin, feel like the ribs are going away from the pelvis, and that's a lot of juicy serratus and scapula work just to bring the arms kind of to that shape, and it's the feeling of lengthening through the front and tipping that sternum up. So I think that might be a better place for you to work. And then if you do feel like the QLs on the right are working more, then you might want to just take that left side up a little bit more. You can play maybe with a bit of rotation. So we come up and rotate maybe a little bit. So we can look at that next time. Okay? And then we did a little bit on the floor, under your pelvis. So just getting a little bit of this rotation. And you might want to play with this exercise I'm going to show you as well with both. So I'm going to go on my back, Franklin ball under one side, kind of back of bum. And then I'm going to drop. So I've got it on my left side. I'm going to drop the right side down. Let that right leg drop into the hip. Then press through the right foot. Connect gently through the hamstring on that side to bring the pelvis back to level. So drop, melt, and then press through that right side to bring it up. So make sure when you're dropping that the pelvis is going straight to the side and not dropping down or up, so we're not going into an anterior or posterior, you're going directly across. And this is really good for just unwinding the inner thighs, getting a little bit into the glutes, and just feeling that rotation through the pelvis. And then I'll do a few on the other side. This always feels different this way. So it feels like I need to do it a little bit more this way with the ball under the right pelvis. Just feels a bit stickier going down on this left side. So if you feel that, then you maybe need to do a little bit more on the sticky side, okay? Okay, and then taking both balls underneath the pelvis. So you decide how narrow or wide they need to be for you to feel comfortable. Okay, and you can play, if the Franklin bowls, like the real Franklin bowls, squash too much, then you probably want these prickly bowls. Okay, and I'm just going to bring my legs up, let them dingle dangle, and the hands are going to go kind of to the inside of your thighs, and you're just going to widen the legs out, and then resist your hands. So you come in and connect to the inner thighs, and that should connect you into your core. So release the legs out, and for you, releasing is not plopping. Okay, so it's kind of a controlled opening, and close the inner thighs to pull the legs back in. And out, and back in. If you wanted to, you could do a little ball squeeze there, and then release and let go of the ball, and then together and the knees apart, releasing the ball. And then I'm bringing the knees together and the feet apart. So I'm internally rotating and then externally rotating, release the ball. So the knees are coming apart and then internally rotating and release. Good. And I'm going to try and do that with the legs up a little bit, slightly bent. So I'm going to internally rotate and separate, and then externally rotate and pull back together. And internally rotate to widen, external rotation to pull back. And do that a few times. Internal open, external close. One more. Internal and external. And then drop the feet and just doing a little bit of arcing. Now what I try and focus on is the pelvis, staying very neutral, and the legs feeling light in the hips. So we don't want to grip, we want to feel warm, maybe around inside the hip joint. But just feeling that core control to balance ourselves on the ball. And just feeling the weight into the balls. The weight, and just check where your shoulders are, that they're nice and kind of lifted and flat. And just do a few of those, keeping the legs deep in the hip. If you find it's too much to go too fast, slow it down. And what's really interesting sometimes when we feel like our legs are not sitting in the hip, sometimes we need to be more anterior. So if you have come into like more posterior tilts and then you're trying to arc, sometimes I find that we don't get the legs in the hip. So it might be for you to play slightly anterior as we're, not, and I'm not saying it's an arched back, but it's a slight more neutral 6 o'clock. And for me that's really helpful to do the femur arcs kind of more there rather than being too tucked into 12. Okay? Release. Whatever bridge you want, feet on floor, feet on box, feet on couch, but I want your shoulder blades to sit slightly up and flat. Okay, so if they are down on the floor, for me, they need to lift and come up to be flat. And then I can kind of press down through my feet, press down through my lats, keep the back of the neck long. I'm stabilizing through the back of the leg, so I'm really feeling my heels pushing down, the ribs staying connected, and then you can either articulate in traction, but keep the shoulder blades from kind of going forward like this. So I'm tractioning, coming down. So a few of those, really feeling, are you coming down evenly, or do we need to come down almost a little bit on that left side? So do the left ribs and the left waist and the left back of pelvis need to come down. And you can play with coming down on the right and coming down on the left, and maybe doing a little bit more on the left. And then we did a little bit of side gliding. So moving the hips and the ribs slightly laterally in space. And maybe giving a little bit more to that left side. Okay? So a little bit to the right, but maybe a bit more to the left. And you could come down a little bit and do it there. So if we're stuck a little bit in the thoracic, we'll find that this lateral shift is a bit harder lower down. And then roll. Lovely. Come over onto all fours. Okay, you did this really beautifully. So going into 12 with our pelvis, and then keeping that lovely retraction, slowly coming back to more of that anterior tilt. So where your legs feel like they're sitting in your hips, navel in, and then chest to chin, less of the chin. And then again, roll. So slow. sure that inner corset is still on as you lengthen through the spine. And then from there you can come down into your plank. So we do this a lot. So you either come down from here and then make sure you still have that slight retraction. So we don't want to overdo the 12, I think, for you. I think we need to play a little bit with being more neutral, hugging the corset up, making sure the lower ribs are stable, and then the chest to the chin. Okay, eyeballs looking down. So we can feel the serratus. And hold for a few seconds, and then come back. And if you feel that you're pretty solid there, and that feels okay for you, you can do that tiny, tiny, tiny bit of leg raise. Okay? And I think that's going to challenge that lateral stability in you. So it's a very, very, very tiny lift of the knee, and then you come back down, and then a little bit on the other side, and you want to really identify whether you're shifting or twisting at all. Okay? So you're keeping very, very aligned in the middle, and I slowly, slowly press into the one knee to lift the other knee. Keeping that slight anterior, okay? That makes my core work much deeper than if I'm too posterior and kind of too rounded. Okay, the other place you can come to is from here, get the shoulders, and I find this really helpful for serratus is to widen the ribs. So I'm kind of spreading the ribs out. And then I come up into my plank from there. So this gives me a little bit more serratus activation, and then I can just go into the extension from there. Yeah, the other way you can do it is with the ball. So the ball is under the chest, and then the arms come a little bit closer, and we tuck the toes, we press down the knees, and then you elongate the upper back. So feel if that feels like a good option for you for thoracic stuff. I find that is a little bit too much for me in my middle of shoulders. They can't stabilize as well as this option. So I opt for this. And then coming up, because I feel like I'm not pinching the shoulder blades back, and I can come into that extension a little bit easier. And then just play with being too tucked under or a little bit anterior tilted. And then once the toe's better, we can look a little bit more at some footwork and toesy-woesy stuff. All right, hopefully